Z-scores and percentiles by themselves can tell you useful information about how to compare different individuals. However, you can also use these values, because they have no units in and of themselves, to compare or combine multiple different categories for a single individual. For example, let's imagine that 40-yard dash and height are both important, and I want the person who has the most overall height and the least overall 40-yard dash time. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and use z-scores in both cases. So I'm going to create a new column here for height. I already created a z-score column for the 40-yard dash time earlier, but I'm going to do the height z-score. And to do the z-score, I always start my formula with equals, and I have the value I want, so I'm going to click in this cell with the height, minus the average. So my average for all the different heights is going to be average, parenthesis, entire column G here in this case, close my parenthesis, and then close parenthesis again because I opened 2 on top, I need to close 2 on top. Then I divide by the standard deviation. This is straight out of my formula for how to find a z-score. So value minus mean divided by standard deviation. And the function says it wants a list of all the numbers, so I'm going to click on my column G again. It's not taking it, so I do G colon G just like I did with the average. Close my parenthesis, and I should be able to hit enter. And if you just need to reference that formula, you can pause that real quick. And the only reason it's the letter G in there instead of some other letters is because height happens on my spreadsheet to be in column G. Hit enter and I get that z-score. Now I grab the box and scroll all the way down. I click on it, grab the little handle, and scroll all the way down with it. Now I have all my z-scores for height and my z-scores for the 40-yard dash. I'm going to re-expand this column I hid before, the ranking formula. All this means to me is I'm looking for a formula that can combine multiple different categories. Again, like all formulas, I start with equals. I want someone on my Ultimate Frisbee team, in this case, who has a high z-score of height. I want someone who's very tall. So I'm going to take their z-score and I'm just going to click on this person's z-score. However, 40-yard dash time, I want it to be very low. So I want someone who's below average with their 40-yard dash time, because below average means lower time. So instead of adding on the 40-yard dash time and to combine them, I'm actually going to subtract. I'm going to say minus this 40-yard dash time, because that means that if they have a negative score, the negatives will cancel out and I'll make it a bigger number. So my goal here for this ranking formula is that tall and fast people should have big numbers and slow and short people should have smaller numbers. So I hit enter and I get this number here. Now I'm going to drag this down all the way and I'm going to get all these scores. Now it's a little hard to see all these here, but what if I click on my column C, my drop down arrow, and I'm going to sort this from Z to A. Z to A is going to be largest number to smallest number. And in this case it says I have Liz at the top. And if I look at Liz's 40-yard dash time, she is definitely one of the lowest 40-yard dash times. In fact, in the 1 percentile, so only 1% are at or below her score. And then in height, 2.14 for a z-score, she's 2 standard deviations above the average height. So in this case, she ends up having a very high score. Go to the other extreme. Ben, very slow, 5.59 40-yard dash time here. 100% of everyone, he is the slowest one, so 100% is at or below his time. For height, he's about a standard deviation below average. So it looks like Ben is not very tall or fast, so Ben's going to get the lowest score. The reason I can combine numbers that are totally different, such as 40R dash and height, is by using these standardized score, these unitless scores. If I were to simply add 40R dash time to height, or take height minus 40R dash time even, I'm not going to be accounting for where the true differences are between these different units. Seconds and inches are not things that you can just add together. So by going through z-score, I now have a way to combine them. If we want to get fancy, you might say, well, I think that the speed doesn't matter as much as height. I think that height matters twice as much as the speed. So I'm going to take the height in my formula and I'm going to double it, but I'm just going to leave the 40R dash time alone. If I click here in my formula and I want to modify it, I can take the height z-score, the h2 in this case, and I can take 2 times it. 2 times the height minus the 40R dash. So now the height is twice as powerful in my ranking formula, and the 40R dash time is only half as powerful compared to the height. And I'm going to drag this new formula that I created down all the way so it applies to all the data inside. Might take a second, and then it updates. And now I can resort my data and see who comes out on top now. So I'm sorting Z to A. And I still have Liz on top, but now it looks like Connor moved up. So I have a new person moving up the list because they were particularly tall, but maybe their 40R dash time wasn't quite as impressive. So because I weighted one category, thought it was more important, then I can move those people up the list farther. Another area where doing some modifications to the formula is going to help you is going to be in the catches and throws. You'll see short catches and short catch attempts. Well, short catches is how many catches they actually made, whereas attempts is how many times they were thrown at. So if I was thrown at, or this player here was thrown at 227 times, caught 137 of those frisbees. If I create a new column to the right, I can do something such as short catch percentage. And I can take the number of catches, so equals, I always start with equals, take the number of catches by just clicking in that cell, divided by, and that's a forward slash, and click in this cell, number of attempts. And I hit enter, and there is my percentage. I can even drag that all the way down so I get it for all my values. And there's no need to stop at just a percent. Even though a percentage can be useful, it can be even more useful to take that percentage and turn it into a z-score, because then you can standardize it. So short catch percentage, starting out with an equal sign, and take our value, we can just click right over here, minus our average of the entire column, M in this case, and close both our parentheses on top of our fraction and divide it by our standard deviation, STDEV, and it's M colon M again. Close that parenthesis, and that is our z-score formula as always. Hit enter, and there we have a z-score. Note that if you did want to format your short catch percentage as a percent, you can do that under the format, but it does seem to cause some problems with the z-score, so just be careful if you see any of that happening. I took my corner and I'm going to drag my z-scores all the way down, and I could even modify my big formula I had at the beginning to now include my short catching percentage z-score. So I have 2 times my height, because I decided that that was going to be useful, my height z-score, plus my 40R dash z-score, and now I decided that I'm going to add on, let's say short catching is super important, 3 times my short catching percentage, and that's way off the screen here, so I'm going to scroll over to that. Short catching percentage z-score right there. Hit enter, And now we have our new formula that includes 40-yard dash time, height, and short catching percentage. Drag that down, and I have all my new scores. So I'm going to resort this column here from highest to lowest because I made it so all my positive numbers are good. And it looks like Josie, by my new formula, is the best player in the league because she has a reasonably low 40-yard dash time. It's a little bit worse than average because positive is worse than average. But her height is pretty good, which we valued a lot. And the short catching percentage is incredibly high, and that was something that we weighted to be super high. So at 91%, she has a very high Z-score, and that is what shot her to the top. This particular formula is something I just made up on the fly. There's no logic behind it, so I wouldn't use this exact formula for any reason. However, once you figure out what you think is going to be important, what factors do matter in making someone good in this game of Ultimate Frisbee, you might want to play with Z-scores as a way to standardize different values if you're going to combine them into a single formula, or even do some things with percentiles. I haven't talked about that, but you can use the same concept or logic as we did here to combine different percentiles for different players.